Welcome back. And as we mentioned earlier in the show, our coverage, or continued coverage, I should say, on the reflections of the life of Comandante Fidel Castro continues. This time, we're getting a Belizean perspective on what Comandante Fidel Castro meant for us. We have two beneficiaries from the bilateral relations, the education program that exists between the two countries. So we have two Belizean students with us, and we have former Belize ambassador to Cuba. So I have with me Collin Estrada, who was in Cuba in 2000
to 2006.
2000 to 2006, and Joshua Magana, who was there more recently, 2010 to 2015. And of course, as I mentioned, former ambassador of Belize to Cuba, Badi Guerra. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Now, let's start off with you, Ambassador. Looking at what it was like on the ground, being able to continue to strengthen the relationship that existed between Belize and Cuba.
First of all, Marlene, thank you very much for having us here. Mm-hmm. It's a very important moment, and I would like to join the government of Belize and every Belizean that in some way or another has been touched with the moment that we are living now. For me, in my experience, and I will say something that I've never said, I've said it to people who I know, friends. When I was first appointed to Cuba, I kind of didn't want to go. Why do I say that? Because of the negative comments, the negative publicity that had been made. I only knew Cuba for what I've heard on the news or what people said, the negative comments that they made about Cuba. Why am I mentioning this? Is because I would want our people to change that way of thinking.
Yeah.
When I arrived in Cuba, endings of July of 2008, I was nervous, and when I arrived, I felt at home. Mm-hmm. And the more I spent there in Cuba, I felt more and more at home. The people are nice, generous, kind. So it's nothing. It is not that monster that some people try to make it seem. And it's very important for our people to know that Cuba is not that way. The Cubans are not that way. Mm-hmm. What called my attention first and foremost is there is no loitering on the streets. People do enjoy themselves at the Malecon and whatnot. Safe, they have safe fun, sing, play, dance, and they can testify to it because they were there longer than I was. But educationally speaking, everyone gets an education.
Mm-hmm. I think what you are mentioning is so important, and that's why we're really happy to have this segment. And I've mentioned several times in prior interviews that we in Belize are primarily exposed to U.S. media, which means we saw the embargo with Cuba mainly from the American perspective. And many people, even though we may be criticized for bringing it up so often, many Belizeans still believe that the dictatorship was something terrible and people are suffering within Cuba. Now, what you all are able to share is what it's really like on the ground. And I want to ask the students, did you have the very same fears? Now, you had to go through the process of applying for the scholarships, which means you kind of knew that you would get yourself into this if you had received the scholarship. So tell me if you had the very same fears as Ambassador has just mentioned about moving to Cuba.
In 2000, I got my scholarship, and when I told people that I got my scholarship, I was dissuaded a lot. Yeah. Why are you going to go to Cuba? You're going to have ration, you're going to come back slim, maga, all of those stuff. You're going to eat horse. And so one of the things I said is that let me go and experience it for myself. And when I remembered there was a group of us, because at the time there were about 45 scholarships, but only 25 were filled. And so we went from Belize to the border, and then we went up to Cancun, and we flew from there.
Yeah.
And it was very surprising when we came off the plane to see the beauty of Cuba. And one of the things we were expecting was that we'd have been barricaded and the place would have been run down and stuff like that. And when we reached there, is that we were ushered in some nice vans, you know. And as we start to get to know the place and we looked at the Cuba, we found out that even in terms of tourism, they had 5-star hotels. They had the latest model vehicles if you wanted, if you had the money to do so. And even in going to school, it was a global university because you met people from all over the world, Angola, Mozambique, South America, the Caribbean. And so when going to school, it was like, man, it is an experience that people would pay money for.
Yeah.
Okay, and for me, I always tell it is 6 years of a wonderful experience.
Yeah. And for you, Joshua?
Well, to not repeat anything what he said, because it was the same thing.
So you got your warnings too?
Yeah, we got the warnings that Cuba, oh, you're not going to get this, you're not going to get that. But the experience that also I found when I was there in 2010, 2015, the Belize was getting more advanced in technology in terms of phones and internet on phone, the internet access. We didn't have that access in Cuba. We didn't have social media. So what we had was a social gathering. I could recall my days, my weekends, my free times we would spend with people from all over the world, Brazilians, we would making music, everyone with their instruments. We just go and have, like, it was an experience that I don't think that I would have found it anywhere else. And I've traveled a little bit, and I haven't seen that much of the international gathering, no? And in terms of the educational system, they mold us, they teach us to become professionals so that we can come back in our country and we can further develop our country. They don't instill none of their values and say, oh, you have to be a socialist, you have to be a communist, or capitalism is bad. No, they don't. They don't instill values in us. Those values, they just said, you know what, this world, you should think about your brothers, who you work with, who you graduate with, and try to form the world, make the world a better place through your education and through your country.
I like where you're going there in terms of what it was like to interact with the Cuban people, because, and we've mentioned this before, obviously, the Cuban Revolution took place in 1959, which means there are many people who still live in Cuba there are a small population who live through the change, and the majority have only known that way of life. What was it like interacting with Cubans? Did you get the sense, because if you listen again to the US media, who will only speak of those who ran away, they often paint the picture of restrictions and barricades and all that you cannot have. But was that the sentiment from the masses of Cubans that you interacted with on a daily basis?
If you'd allow me, Marlene, that was one of the things that I wanted to mention as well. My first night in Cuba, I was asked to stay at the Melia Coiba because they were doing some repairing at the residence. And I woke up at 2 in the morning and kind of looked down through the window. 2 in the morning, just to see a huge amount of people by the Malecon. And I was wondering, what are those people, what's going on, you know, I'm awake or something, because that was the only thing that I thought of, you know, at such hours. People dancing, playing music. I'll say it in just a few words. The media can say whatever, negative things about Cuba. But one thing I can tell you is, what I learned from Cubans, they might not have everything, and they don't have everything, but they are not depressed. They're always positive. Even the billboards in Cuba, they're all positive. I never did come across a negative one. All positive, and the people are very positive, dancing, singing. Tomorrow they don't know what it's going to be like for them, but today they're dancing, they're enjoying, they're drinking, and they share that enthusiasm, you know. So that was something that I learned. We have everything and we are always complaining.
It's one of the simplest things in terms of being in the dorm. A domino could start a party. Okay, and so the thing about it is that it is also they share what they have. Okay, and so I remembered when I did my interview to go into my faculty, that the person that interviewed me, I told her I'm going to have some issues with statistics, and one of the first things she said is that whenever you start to have that problem, come and see me, because you need to graduate. And I call that person my Cuban mother, and we have continued that relationship even though I have been out of Cuba for the past 10 years. You know, it's just the warmth that they give you in terms of your treatment, in terms of wanting to help you, in terms of they wanting to see you succeed so that you're able to help your country, you know. So that is the warmth that we have.
And well, from a other perspective about how Cubans feel, like last night, the homage that they had for Fidel Castro at the Revolution Plaza, everyone was shouting in between speeches, "I am Cuba, yo soy Cuba." That was something that since 2010 I was hearing it until 2015 I graduated, and I'm still hearing that. We have a few Cubans that, like on the American media, come out and say, you know what, oh, that dictatorship, this, that. But when you look at the mass population, that 11 million and odd people in Cuba, and they say, you know, we are a country, look at us, why do you discriminate our system if we are educating you and the world? Why do you look up, why do you look forward and think of us so negative when we have something beautiful going on? And that's how I see the people, the Cubans that I've lived with, the ones that the normal class Cubans, and that's how they behave. Like.
And you're so right. I mean, I think understated, completely understated, is the stellar healthcare system, the education system, and the robust tourism sector as well. Now let's talk about your perspective living in Cuba as to what the relationship was between Fidel Castro and the people, and what it meant for you to be able to watch how people interact and respect a leader like him. I
remembered my first year. He was giving a speech at San Jose de las Lajas. That is out of Havana, and the crowds that swell in terms of just wanting to see Fidel. He carried an aura with him whereby it was one of he being the leader of that country. And some of the students ourselves, we got up like from around 3 in the morning. The speech was not until like around 9 o'clock, but we wanted to be in the front. And when we got there at 3 in the morning, we were at the back because there were so much people already there waiting for him to be able to come. And there were several other areas and other times when he would speak whereby the crowds were swelling because everybody wanted to see Fidel, everybody wanted to be there. And the thing about it is that even the young people in my faculty, they would tell you plain and straight, we are working for the revolution because we are representing Fidel Castro, we're representing what we believe in. And so it was one of the things whereby even in terms of when it was time to volunteer, you were doing it because you were doing it for the Cuban Revolution, okay? And people, the students at the faculty wanted to do so because they wanted to continue with his humanism of giving back to the community.
Yeah, and one
you would have been there for the time when it transitioned to his brother, right?
Yeah, the transition. Well, I'll his brother took the presidency in 2008. So in 2010 and between 2010 and 2015, I attended a few times to one of the big gatherings that Cuba has, which is the Labor Day March, 1st of May. I attended on the banner of my university, and sometimes on other occasions on different faculties. It was one of the biggest gatherings. It was held at the same place, Plaza de la Revolution Plaza, and every time I attended, it was somewhere between 600 to 800 people who marched in that, who did that march, and we marched to the plaza just to meet the president of Cuba, and everyone was just so excited, so enthusiastic. It was never like, oh, they were forced to go. You see that they are enthusiastic about being there. They always wanted to participate.
Yeah,
that's exactly what I was going to say. I said, man, what is this negativity? What are these people outside saying? When nobody's being forced at gunpoint to come out and participate in this massive Primero de Mayo would be one. Goodness gracious, it's a pity I didn't bring pictures, because I have pictures of Primero de Mayo there. It's huge, but nobody, Marlene, is being forced to go out. So you see the love that they have for this man.
Yeah.
And I was envious. I said, man, if I would only feel, we should feel the same way for our country, the same way for our leaders, because it's important. And just to finish up with this, Marlene, we established relations back on the 15th of July, 1995. And ever since then, we have strengthened more and more our relations with cooperation, bilaterals and whatnot. These people have benefited. And that's why yesterday I posted something on Facebook, because we're going to be having on Sunday evening at 7 in Benke at the House of Culture, and I'm taking this opportunity to invite the Cayo district people to come and join us at 7 p.m. at the House of Culture. Some people have said, well, I didn't study, I didn't benefit anything. We still get medical assistance. We send Belizeans to Cuba, fully paid. Students. But most and foremost, every Belizean should be grateful that we are independent, that we keep our sovereignty. And one of the first persons who stood up and stood by our side and said, I am present to assist Belize, to defend Belize with this Belize-Guatemala issue, was this man, Fidel Castro Ruz. And I think that every Belizean should remember that. So I just wanted to mention that, Marlene.
It's a very important point. It's been coming out for the past couple of days, and I think people are starting to realize the impact of the support that we have gotten from Cuba. Do we even have, a number of persons who benefited from the education cooperation agreement? There's so many doctors, so many students, so many professionals. They go for short term, they go for long term. Do we know at this point? Because it seems to be quite a large number.
Yes. I don't have the exact numbers, but we have a lot.
Yeah.
Right now, we presently have 157 studying in Cuba.
Yeah.
So, we're talking...
And multiply that by the number of years.
Exactly.
Just multiplied by the number of years from 1995
we've had
until now.
Yeah.
And then if one of the things that we also have to be able to understand is that a lot of times we think that how it is only in the medical field.
It's not.
It has, like, for example, I study psychology.
Physical and sports.
We have agronomy. We have people who have studied pharmacy architecture, engineer. And so it is a great amount of people who are out there who have benefited
many of our professionals
from the experiences and being educated in Cuba.
And there have even been short-term professional development courses for people who work in public service as well. So we know a number of people have been direct beneficiaries of the relationship that they've offered, free of cost, as you pointed out.
Yeah.
And while many see them as a poor country, they didn't hold back from lending a helping hand to anyone else, especially Belize. Now, I wanna talk just very briefly in wrapping up about what your reaction is when you see the passing. Some say, will his legacy continue? Will this be a turning point for Cuba? There are many questions about what the passing of Fidel Castro may mean, and we're really having this conversation as outsiders. But I feel that since you all have had first-hand experience there, you have an idea as to how much the Cubans are satisfied and interested in maintaining what has been established by Fidel Castro. So let's talk about that for a second.
Well, I think that last night's show was very important. The homage that they paid to Fidel, whereby the leaders of the different countries, the world were there, and they all share the same sentiment of love and gratitude towards Cuba for all that Cuba has done for our people, for their people, for ours. And just the show of the massive crowd that was there, and the shouting and yelling of the people saying, "I am Fidel," and then the words of the president that said that the legacy will continue. I think it will continue.
Yeah.
I think it will continue.
I think the legacy will continue. There's a lot that he has given, and even up to the point that seeing that how his brother has transitioned on, and there hasn't been that much change, it will continue with Raul.
Yeah.
Yeah, that the same thing that when I was there in 2015, I graduated. A lot of people expressed to me, and even I found this in the youth. When you ask who is Fidel Castro, they know him as a president. They didn't live in the era of the fighting of the revolution and everything, so they just know him by history. So to them, they express that Fidel Castro has become more than a man. He's like a system for them, a father, something that has to live on, because that's the way how they can see themselves advancing in their country in terms of education. And they look at themselves as the lighthouse for the Caribbean and the Americas. That's how they consider themselves in terms of the medical system and the educational system.
Nice. That's very telling. And I think, Ambassador, you pointed out that is one of the things perhaps we don't share as Belize. We don't have that type of reverence or respect for our leaders, the way we see that love from the Cuban people for Fidel. And I suspect, people who have lived through the revolution, or even people who know that they will have a meal every day, they will have access to health care, they will have access to education, no matter what, working, not working, poor, whatever your name, title is, that they will always have that access. And I think that sense of security can lend to that type of love.
And the thing is, Miss, that if we many people don't realize it, nobody in Cuba goes to bed in an empty stomach. Not one person. Not one person. Everyone is educated. Security is, my gosh. We would all in all countries would want to adopt that system,
Yeah.
Even the life expectancy rate, it is a very high one, it's at 79 years.
Wow. Yeah. So what would be your message? What do you want to tell Belizeans at this point in time? Just closing. I'm getting the cue. We're totally out of time. What would you say to Belizeans about what this moment represents in history?
Well, I think that this moment, it's a moment to show gratitude for what we have gotten, gratitude for what Fidel Castro has given to the world. He stood up for us in the UN when he stood up for all the non-aligned countries which we belong to. He stood up and assisted us when we needed the medical assistance to advance us in the educational system. So to me, this is a time of gratitude, not to look at what the revolution was, but to be grateful for everything they have given us as Belizeans.
And also, just to continue with what he is saying, is that being thankful, there are a lot of times whereby we don't take the time out to say thanks. And they're like this moment is saying thanks to what has been done for us. And just for those who are watching, on Saturday at 6 o'clock, we're going to be having a candlelight vigil at the Cuban Embassy in Belize City. Friends of Cuba, come on out for that vigil.
Yes, I joined them with the gratitude part of it, and I would also add, you know, all governments have negative things. We are not perfect, so why keep nailing and why keep pointing, you know, at the negative things? What about the positive things that come out of it? What about all the positive things that this man has done for us? You know, people need to realize that. You know, just that, Marlene. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As we mentioned, the Book of Condolences is open at the Cuban Embassy. You can share your thoughts, reflections, and gratitude at the Embassy on Manatee Drive in Belize City. That's in Buttonwood Bay, so do be sure to do that. Take a break, and when we come back, we'll be talking to representatives of the Girl Guides of Belize as they prepare a fundraising initiative to help the Mercy Burn Care Fund. So stay tuned.